This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. This show is live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Today, well, we get an update on the situation in Philippi, in Cape Town shortly, where the community's been torn apart by violence. Shinganyoka will give us the latest on Burundi after a one-day summit in Dar es Salaam. New houses for military veterans who are struggling is on the cards. We also cross to Tanzania a little bit later as albino fears grow ahead of elections in that country. Later, we deal with languages in South African schools, and hopefully we'll close with an update from Dakar in Senegal on child marriage. But first, the day's news from Anindo Mel.
Good morning, I'm Anindo Mal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The Lion Park north of Johannesburg will remain open following two visitors being attacked by a lion yesterday. A 22-year-old American woman was killed when she was attacked by a lioness through the open passenger window of a car. Gauteng police are investigating the fatal incident. This is the third attack at the park in the past 4 months. Lion Park Operations Manager Scott Simpson says the lion is now most likely to be sent to an enclosure not open to the public.
According to the witnesses, it walked quite slowly towards the car and stopped roughly a meter away. The lady was busy taking pictures of it. The lion then sort of lunged at the car and it bit the lady through the window.
Former President Nelson Mandela's grandson Mandla is expected to be sentenced in the Mthatha Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape today. He was convicted of assaulting a Mthatha teacher 2 years ago. While the chief of Mvezo was found guilty of assault, he was acquitted on the charge of pointing a firearm. Murder-accused Ramiz Patel will today find out if he is granted bail in the Polokwane Magistrates Court. Patel stands accused of murdering his wife Fatima at their home in Polokwane. It has been more than a month since Patel made a formal bail application. In his application, Patel said that he is innocent of any wrongdoing and that his wife was killed in a house robbery. The murder trial of former crime intelligence head Richard Ndluli and his co-accused Ntembeni Mthunzi will continue in the North Gauteng High Court. They have pleaded not guilty to the murder of Opa Ramogibe, the husband of Ndluli's ex-lover. Ndluli and Mthunzi are also facing charges of intimidating, kidnapping, assault with intent to grievous bodily harm, attempted murder and defeating the ends of justice. In Nigeria, up to 70 people are now known to have died in an accident caused by a fuel tanker. The tanker crashed into a busy bus station in the city of Onitsha and exploded. Red Cross officials say dozens of others were injured in the incident. It's believed the tanker had been speeding before veering out of control. And in China, a major rescue operation is underway on the Yangtze River. This after a ferry with more than 450 people on board capsized last night. It's been reported that 5 people have died after the passenger ship was caught in a cyclone. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Eben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Police have described the situation in Philippi East as quiet but tense, with no incidents reported overnight. Yesterday, 6 people appeared in the Athlone Magistrates Court on the Cape Flats on charges of public violence and arson in Philippi East. At least 3 people were killed and 5 others wounded in clashes between residents of the Marikana informal settlement and Lower Crossroads. Private properties were torched in a violent service delivery that escalated into a fight between 2 communities. Municipal infrastructure was also petrol bombed, causing damage of millions of rands. The city is estimating the damage to its infrastructure and facilities alone at around 20 million rand. Police in the city are maintaining a strong presence, though, in the area. Now, Cape Town's Mayoral Committee member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, joins us in our Sea Point studio. Very good morning to you, JP. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Eben. It's a pleasure.
JP, can you give us a latest update as to the situation in Philippi East?
As you described earlier, it is quiet now, but tense. There was a public meeting last night during which, unfortunately, demands were made that the Marikana residents leave by the end of the week. So they've agreed to a ceasefire or peace for the time being, but demands by the Lower Crossroads community that the residents of Marikana vacate that land which they illegally occupied at the end of last year during an extremely violent land invasion. And of course, realistically speaking, you're not going to remove that many people from the land, and it's private land. So any eviction is dependent on the actions of the private property owners.
And what's the thinking between the communities that's really separated by a single road? What is the fight and the argument really about?
Well, I think, as with much in South Africa, the debate really is about, I suppose, resources in the end, or the perception of resources and who's getting what. The so-called Marikana informal settlement, not named by the city, so it's a name given by some people themselves, was the subject of a land invasion on 5 parcels of private land. And as such, the city can't put in services on that land, and that was explained to people last year already, and they well know it. There are eviction applications pending for some of that. So in the meantime, there is ongoing protest action, similar to what we saw with the land invasion at Siqalo next to Mitchell's Plain as well. And that antagonizes the community, the formal residents next door in Lower Crossroads, who are constantly experiencing the disruption, damage of private infrastructure, and crime directed at their own properties, electricity theft, metal theft, water usage, etc. And that antagonism over time seems to have built up a powder keg that last week was ignited during one of these protest actions when a particular lady's property was damaged. Community in Lower Crossroads took umbrage, and a tit-for-tat retaliatory action started, which saw petrol bombs being lobbed back and forth across Symphony Way, and gunfire, especially on Saturday. It was very intense gunfire back and forth Saturday night, which ended in several deaths and many serious injuries.
A long-term solution. What is the city of Cape Town seeing as a long-term solution? These communities live right on top of each other. I think Symphony Way is the only thing that really divides this area, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a single, fairly narrow 2-lane road. And certainly the land on which the people have settled in Marikana, zoned industrial use. It was meant for the development of factories and job opportunities, which I think adds to the aggravation being experienced in that area. And a violent land invasion last year that was headed by Sescona, an affiliate of the ANC, and that is for us now very problematic, the consequences of that. And in the meantime, we are trying to we'll try and do what we can, but again, as I say, we are limited in terms of being able to deliver services. We're going to have to get people to live together for the time being until the legal proceedings around any eviction actions concludes, because I don't think realistically that Crossroads residents can believe they'll be able to drive away thousands of people who've now illegally occupied that land through violence without the police being forced to also take action. An extremely untenable situation and slightly unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like this, certainly not this level of public violence between different parts of a community.
Is there an element that this is something that's on the rise in the poorer communities on the Cape Flats, where neighbours are starting to turn on each other? We've seen the situation, I think, was it with the Duff community some time ago as well? Is that accurate? Is that something that concerns you?
No, I think what you have is the tension always between informal settlements and formal settlements. We have a similar dynamic playing itself out next to Mitchell's Plain on Jacques Gerwel Boulevard with the Siqalo informal settlement. also the subject of an extremely violent land invasion. Also, again, coordinated by that same informal settlement group that became Seskona. This is problematic. There are also reports that those plots were sold, so there are people trying to profiteer, and they're targeting private landowners because those private landowners are less capable of defending themselves. In recent months, the city has added itself to that. We are now ensuring that we come to the defense of private landowners. Previously, the legal advice said we couldn't. We now have legal advice that says we can and should. So we are acting in the broad public interest to assist those private landowners, as we did recently in Khayelitsha, and we will continue to do so. In fact, this afternoon we're addressing the South African Property Owners Association to brief property owners on vulnerable land holdings on how to protect themselves and how the cooperative arrangements where the city will work to ensure that we don't become victims of further such land invasions, because every land invasion brings with itself a long period of high fire risk, high crime, flooding, and the inability to render services because of the absence of any kind of planning or municipal zoning. So you don't have access roads, you can't effectively remove waste, etc. So every land invasion is a terrific failure for the people of that community, because they are condemned to long-term poor living conditions, especially if it's on private land, because the city can't render services there by law.
Thank you for joining us and giving us that update. That's Cape Town Mayoral Committee Member for Safety and Security, JP Smith, giving us an update and, well, the backstory to what is a very disturbing story playing itself out in Philippi East on the Cape Flats, where community has turned on community. Not a pretty sight. Now, the government of Burundi is willing to consider delaying elections after East African leaders appealed for a 1.5-month postponement in the interest of free and fair elections. A one-day summit by East African leaders came to an end in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania yesterday. The regional body has urged more dialogue to end the deadly violence that has caused 100,000 people to flee the country there. Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza, whose bid for the third term in office sparked opposition protest, did not attend the summit. The country is to go to parliamentary elections this Friday, with presidential polls set for the 26th of June. Burundian Foreign Minister Alain Nyamwitwe told the SABC that Bujumbura will be guided by the views of all stakeholders. Now, our correspondent in Harare, Zimbabwe, Shinga Inyoka, attended the summit, and she now joins us on the line. A very good morning to you, Shinga. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning to you, Eben.
Shinga, can you give us a little overview of what happened in Dar es Salaam?
Well, as you're aware, the East African leaders had decided to hold a second emergency summit. This happened within the space of 2 weeks, and this was specifically to look at the crisis in Bujumbura, Burundi, as well as to chart a way forward to ensure that not only that peace prevails, but also that the opposition and the government begin to talk again and reach some kind of consensus that would lead to peaceful elections. Now, there was a communique that was released on Sunday when the conference ended. This specifically commended the progress that's been made in terms of a return to constitutionalism after the attempted coup about 2 weeks ago. But there was also a recognition that more work still needs to be done to ensure that these upcoming elections are free and fair. And that informed the decision or the recommendation that Burundi stakeholders meet and they come to some kind of a consensus that would lead to the postponement of those elections. So really at this stage, that's where the situation stands. The government has said that it's open to recommendations from the opposition parties about the postponement of elections.
Now, Shinga, the polarizing figure in the whole thing is the President, Pierre Nkurunziza. What were his reasons then for not attending the summit? And then can you maybe tell us what was the reaction of those at the summit and then wider society to his non-showing?
Well, there had been a very little expectation that he would attend this summit. 2 weeks ago, when he did travel to Tanzania, there was an attempted coup in his country. We put that question to the Foreign Affairs Minister why he specifically didn't attend this time, but the Foreign Affairs Minister, Alan Nyamitwe, denied that it was an issue of security and concern that there might be another attempted coup. What he did say is that the president was very aware that with the upcoming elections, he needs to be at home, and that there's really nothing wrong with sending a representative. It's something that's done across the world, and it's something that's happened before. So they were really trying to allay fears that this was a snub by President Nkurunziza. And essentially, what the people that attended this conference had said is that Burundi was represented. It's not as if the country snubbed this particular summit.
Well, Shinga, thank you for joining us on the line there from Harare in Zimbabwe, giving us an update after the one-day summit in Dar es Salaam. Shinga Nyoka attended the summit in Dar es Salaam, dealing with the crisis in Burundi. Of course, we see continued clashes between military force and protesters in that country. Now, Gauteng police are looking through video surveillance footage in the hope of... no, this is not the story. We are talking about a lion attack, isn't it? The lion attack is the one that caused all the trouble in South Africa yesterday. Now, Menzi Kulati says, but then again, any death should not happen untimely. Tragedies like the lion attack should never happen. We're human beings, not animals. We should behave like human beings then. Noah Muparuri says, Lion Park, my heart bleeds for the American lady who lost her life. May her soul rest in peace. Digetso says, apparently pamphlets are given that you should close your windows. Had instruction been followed, she would be alive. Do we ever follow instructions, though, Digetso? Do we ever behave accordingly? Sometimes I think that we just don't. Timika says, I'm failing to empathize with the lion attack victims. Why were their windows rolled down? And didn't they see the lion approaching? Apparently, Tamika, the lion approached very slowly. Our very own Faith Daniels says, the lion won't be put down after the lion attack. Yes, lions do what lions do. They eat other animals, very much like ourselves. Now, let's take a look at our picture of the day. Up to 70 killed as fuel tanker crashes into a bus station, causes explosion and fire in Onitsha in Nigeria. There, that picture from Mete. Mete sent in that picture after an incredible tragedy that was. Let's now take a look at the front pages from around the world. What is happening elsewhere in the world? We start in Europe. The Times, an American woman has been killed and a man is in a critical condition after a lion jumped through a car window and mauled them at one of South Africa's top tourist attractions. That is now world news, isn't it? Then the United Kingdom, the Daily Telegraph, the National Health Insurance must improve patient care and stop making excuses about a lack of funding after the government committed to giving it an extra £8 billion a year, the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt said. And the International New York Times reports that Beijing has introduced a tough new ban on public smoking that took effect at midnight in the Chinese capital, aimed at ending the era of tobacco fumes clinging to clothes and lungs. Let's take a look now at what's happening around the country here in South Africa. In Johannesburg, two men have been arrested in connection with the hijacking of a truck transporting 1.5 million rands worth of electrical goods in Lenasia. They will appear in the Heidelberg Magistrates Court for truck hijacking, theft and being in possession of a stolen vehicle. Then in Polokwane in the north, the Magistrates Court there, the judgment in the bail application of businessman Ramiz Patel, who is accused of murdering his wife in April, will be handed down today. Also in Cape Town, former President Nelson Mandela's grandson, Zwelivelile Mandla Mandela, is expected to be sentenced in the Mthatha Magistrates Court today. He was convicted of assaulting Mthatha teacher Mlamli Ngudle more than 2 years ago now. Before we go to a break, President Barack Obama is speaking out about Bruce Jenner after images of his new self, a lady called Caitlyn, took over Twitter and other social media sites yesterday. Here's the picture. Caitlyn appeared on the front cover of Vanity Fair, creating quite a public debut. The Obama administration tweeted via the 53-year-old president at Barack Obama account, saying that it takes courage to share your story. Obama has encouraged all members of the LGBT community to share their story as well. I cannot believe that used to be Bruce Jenner. Say fact is always stranger than fiction. You're watching Newsroom. We'll be back with you after a short break.
We live in a digital era, and the number of Africans with mobile phones is rapidly increasing.
Twitter use is predominantly being done on smartphones. This is a very African phenomenon.
Here, there are constantly new innovative ways to make the internet more affordable. With that, we're seeing protests against governments proposing methods to limit access. On Network, we give you information about all of this. We also have new computers, games, and robots.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom. South Africa's military veterans played a significant role during apartheid by sacrificing their lives to fight for a free South Africa. Now, 21 years after democracy, a number of military veterans still struggle just to survive. Many still do not have access to adequate health care, houses, and are often unemployed. In an attempt to honour our military veterans and fight their plight, the Department of Defence and Military Veterans has for the past few years allocated millions of rands for the Department of Military Veterans. In the budget speech, the Deputy Minister of Defence and Military Veterans announced that 78 million rand has been allocated for the construction of around 1,000 houses for poorer military veterans. Today in Pretoria, we are joined by the Director General of the Department of Military Veterans, Mr. Tsepi Motumi. A very good morning to you, Mr. Motumi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and good morning, Evan.
Just tell us quickly the plan to start rolling out homes for disadvantaged military veterans. How is that plan going to proceed? And then tell us about whether you're going to start a rollout in all the provinces.
Yes, thanks very much, Evan. I'd like to first start by paying tribute to the youth of June 16, this being Youth Month in South Africa. That the youth of June 16, 1976 were the youth that are today's military veterans.
Yeah.
But then on the subject of housing for military veterans, we do have a budget that has been allocated, and in the last year, the last financial year ending end of March, we actually transferred 78 million for housing for military veterans to the provinces to build the houses for military veterans. This year we have a budget allocation as well in addition to that for building of houses for military veterans. I should say this is done in partnership with the National Department of Human Settlement as well as the Provincial Departments of Human Settlements. Of course, notwithstanding that we have transferred to the provinces for the building of houses, we have not yet been able to then say we're cutting the ribbon, we're opening the houses. But this year we firmly believe that we'll be able to do that and say to military veterans, here are the houses. We're doing that also on the basis of confirmed and verified bona fide military veterans across the provinces, and also on the basis of the lists that we have as of the bona fide military veterans who are on our database.
How do you vet and verify military veterans to avoid embarrassment and the kind of chances that we often see?
We would have had their biography, we would have had their service record, we would have had a confirmation from the force or armed force that they served in to confirm that they are indeed a bona fide military veteran. And in cases where no such record exists, we actually have a process of verification which we've been running since the last 2 years now to ensure that anybody who makes or lays claim to being a military veteran is indeed a bona fide military veteran, and they've been confirmed and verified as such. So before any disbursement of any benefit that is due to military veterans in terms of our legislation, the credibility and the confirmation and verification that an individual is indeed on the database or is a bona fide military veteran is then made.
Now, taking into account we have so many military veterans, how do you see this process now proceeding, and also how do you communicate with all the beneficiaries?
We do communicate. We have provincial offices, but also through our office we communicate, and we also have our own email and internet platforms that we use, as well as social media that we use to communicate with our military veterans. And of course, this is also one other form of communication that we're doing, and periodic statements that we release from time to time, as well as, in addition, having imbizos or even shows that we then have shows in terms of having military veterans on road shows where we go to a province and gather all the military veterans to have that engagement. We've done so in the past few months in the Western Cape. We're also going to be proceeding to do so in the rest of the provinces in the country.
Thank you for joining us today. That's the Director General of the Department of Military Veterans, Mr. Tsepe Mutumi, and he's talking to us about, I think, a fantastic project of rolling out homes for those that fought during the liberation struggle. Now, often these headlines are disturbing, aren't they? Man due to appear in court for killing his wife. Man beats his wife to a pulp. These are just some of the headlines that have continued to grab newspapers and news stations, not just in our country, but all around the world. The recent Mortuary report has revealed that young men between the ages of 15 and 29 years old are the most likely of being murdered here in South Africa. Ever wondered why these acts of violence involving men are ever so common? Well, for some time, the voices of these men have gone unheard. Over the years, numerous studies have been done to try and understand the psyche of men. Now, here today to help us better understand masculinity and shed some light on why we continue to see more of these violent acts. Well, we are joined in studio by Professor Kopano Ratele, who's an expert on men. Very good morning to you, sir. An expert on men. I've never ever met an expert on men.
Well, we do exist. Yeah. We do exist here and elsewhere in the world.
It's very interesting. Unfortunately, we see so many of these terrible headlines as we do in our mainstream media. At times, I think that our streets are littered with things like untreated mental illness and things sort of escalate from there. Is that part of our problem?
I'm glad about what you just said. Well, there's some data about that there's mental health does not get priority in our country. So yes, some of these gruesome acts, when somebody just murders someone so horrifically.
Yeah, or children even in some instances.
Rape of children, or cutting somebody's genitalia and shoving it into their mouths. That's horrific. Yeah. Clearly somebody who cannot
be mentally 100%
and empathize with killing somebody like that. Clearly there's some untreated mental disorders there. Yeah. So that's already one priority that we seem to have put on the back burner because of so many problems.
Well, the other issue that I see, and I look at a lot of statistics doing this job, as you can understand, and some of the statistics are quite disturbing that I see. It's about fatherhood in a way is the thing that bothers me the most, you know. And everything's racialized in South Africa, of course, as you understand. So the research would come in, it says, white and Indian households, the father is present more than 85% of the time. Right. Which means that, you know, the level of education within the family and the kids and so forth, they normally fare a little bit better in civil society. In black and coloured communities, the father is present less than 40% of the time. And you see a lot more social ills within that. Is that part of the masculinity thing that we have to overcome as men to make sure that we are in our communities, that we are present as parents?
You're an expert on men too, really. I don't know what I'm doing
here. Okay, so we don't need you then.
You don't need me.
It's something that I think about every single day.
There's a whole history to this. And the numbers you just quoted, that somehow Indian families are more intact in the sense of having fathers in the family, as opposed to coloured and black families, Indian and white families, higher numbers, over 80%, to close to 90% for Indian families. And then black and coloured families, way down. I mean, the fact comes from a history of migrancy, a history of fractured families, a history that was brought on to us.
A history of oppression, really.
Of colonial oppression
speaks about oppression,
and apartheid. And clearly, if you grow up in a family where you don't have a father present, you're starting without a model even to act against. I mean, you see your father, so you have a living, absent father in the family. But there's also another problem, additional problem. If the father also has his own problems from a prior generation and is present but emotionally absent, you already have a problem there. So there's a host of overlapping and intersecting problems that young men have to deal with growing in such circumstances. And of course, it doesn't only end in the family, it goes to the community. Some communities are more intact, and clearly if you live in Constantia or in Sandton, as opposed to living in Polar Park or Thokoza,
or wherever around the country. So, you know, the thing that's very close to my heart, I believe the killing must stop. We must find a way to stop killing each other. How are we going to stop the killing?
Well, the report that you mentioned is published in the WHO bulletins. Indicates that the policies around guns have helped. So that's the first thing. You have to demilitarize. You have to have policies around taking guns out of people's hands, because it's come down. It used to be so high, but now you talk about just over 5,000, between 5,000 and 6,000 people killed with guns. But even then, you still have a whole lot of people killed with knives or blunt objects, as you saw in that news.
Or strangled or beaten to death.
So clearly, the problem goes beyond guns. It goes to this fact of masculinities, of living in a violent country where men grew up learning that, well, the only source of power that they have is their bodies, and they use those bodies as weapons against other men mostly. So the most grave violence is men against men. That's homicidal violence, but also other grave acts of violence. But of course, sexual violence happens on women's bodies. But also, by the way, we don't have enough data, we don't have enough research on the kinds of sexual violence against men by other men.
And I don't think it goes reported even. We've run out of time for this interview. I want to ask you on air, because I want to hold you to it. I want you to come back almost every month to talk about men and the issues that we have, because I think the problem that our country faces is very much a malevolent problem.
I'd like that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There is Professor Kopano Ratele. He's going to come back. He says now we're going to organize it. You're going to come back monthly to give us views about men, because, guys, we are struggling. All of us are struggling. Even the guys that you think are doing well, we're struggling. Even me, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to keep it together every day, you know? It's tough. And in a way, it all comes back to our childhood and how we brought up. And, you know, therapy will teach you that at 1,000 Rand an hour. But anyhow, let's take a look at what you're talking about on social media. Of course, at SABC Newsroom, the big story that everyone is still talking about. And this is the lion attack. Now, Onati Grootboom says to us at SABC Newsroom, I don't think it would be right to kill the lion because of carelessness of people. Please leave the lion alone. Onati, the lion is not going to be put down. And I salute you for that comment, because I really think You know, it's no point in killing the lion because the lion does what lions do. If there's an opportunity, he's going to eat you. A lion will eat you. Come on, lion attack. Yes, Luke, you're right. Easy E says, why didn't she close the windows or drive away as she saw it coming? I don't know, you know. What do we know? How often do you do that? How often do you go through a park and think you can stick your head out the window? We've all done those kinds of stuff, and you know, it's in hindsight is a perfect science. It's always great to judge very harshly, but remember, somebody lost a life. A 22-year-old young American woman lost her life. It's a very sad story that happened here, and maybe we should pray for her and the lion. Let's take a look now at what is happening on our Facebook page today. Former President Nelson Mandela's grandson, Zwelivelile Mandla Mandela, is expected to be sentenced in Mthatha Magistrates Court in Eastern Cape today. He was convicted of assaulting Mthatha teacher Mlamli Ngudle 2 years ago now. Then, while several nations and sub-regional organizations have called for Burundi's elections to be postponed, the United Nations insists that an agreement on the way forward should be decided by Burundi's parties themselves. And the head of the UN agency responsible for Palestinian refugees says the 860,000 Gazans relying on food aid is a statistic of shame. Yes, it is. Open the borders already, we say. For more news, updates, you can follow us on Facebook, yes, or you can search SABC Newsroom on there. Also, you can go to our website, sabc.co.za/news. That's where all the latest updates are. Now, petrol price. Before we take a break, we'd like to remind motorists that fuel prices rise at midnight tonight, so you should go and fill up again. The price of petrol will increase this time by 47 cents a litre, and diesel will go up by 46 cents a litre. So make sure you fill up today, and let's keep it friendly and cordial at the garages. Let's not get involved in road rage, amongst other things. This is Newsroom. We will be back with you after a little break.
Morning is when different people take different directions to different places for different reasons to do different things. Streets come alive. Evening is when people go home to their loved ones and turn to South Africa's most watched and trusted evening news. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. The Lion Park north of Johannesburg will remain open following 2 visitors being attacked by a lion yesterday. A 22-year-old American woman was killed when she was attacked by a lioness through the open passenger window of a car. Gauteng police are investigating the fatal incident. Former President Nelson Mandela's grandson, Mandla, is expected to be sentenced in the Mthatha Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape today. He was convicted of assaulting a Mthatha teacher 2 years ago. While the chief of Mvezo was found guilty of assault, he was acquitted on a charge of pointing a firearm. And in China, a major rescue operation is underway on the Yangtze River. This after a ferry with more than 450 people on board capsized last night in a cyclone. It's been reported that 5 bodies have been recovered from the ship. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janine, once again. The Gauteng Department of Education is willing to take the case against the conversion of single medium schools to parallel medium all the way to the Constitutional Court. Last week, the High Court here in Johannesburg ruled that the department must respect the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, FEDSAS, as the last word on what language pupils should be taught in this province's schools. Now, Gauteng Education MEC Panyaza Lesufi has accused the judge of erring. He claims no school will exclude a pupil on the basis of language. The Chief Executive Officer of the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, FEDSAS, is Paul Kolditz. Well, he joins us live from Bloemfontein to take this matter forward. I also want to point out to you, we did invite the Gauteng Department of Education, but they were unable or not available to participate in this program. Paul, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eben, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a privilege to be on your program.
Paul, it looks like you're going to have to defend your stance in the Constitutional Court. If what I'm hearing is right, how do you respond to that and how do you view it?
Well, I mean, the matter has already been dealt with in the Constitutional Court, so I think if it goes to the Constitutional Court once again, we're ready for a rational debate on the correct legal position. So, yes, if it has to go to the Constitutional Court, we're ready for it.
Are you not afraid that that this is the right to education is enshrined in our Constitution, and the refusal to do this dual language a scenario of preference might be a violation of the Constitution, no?
Well, no. The Constitution also guarantees the right to education in the language of your choice. It also protects the right of single medium schools to exist alongside dual or parallel medium schools. So, well, these issues have already been dealt with, and the Constitutional Court has already authoritatively ruled on it, so I'm not quite sure why we have this debate at the moment. What we also must understand is that last week's court application and the court order was not about language in education. It was about compliance with the law. It was about the rule of law. It was about forcing the Department of Education to comply with the rules of law that are already in existence. It didn't deal with language, the language issue directly. What it dealt with is the right of school governing bodies to determine their own admission and language policies, and the lack of legal authority for departmental officials to interfere in those policies or to set aside or ignore those policies in placing learners at particular schools. If the MEC, or anybody for that matter, would have been unhappy with a particular school's language or admission policy, the correct route in a constitutional order under the rule of law would have been for them to go to court and have those policies set aside. That was not done. They took the law into their own hands, and that was what the whole court case was about.
Tell us quickly, what is your message then to parents in the vicinity of some of your schools that children will not be disadvantaged by the ruling?
Well, certainly it was just the status quo that was restored in terms of the law, and the present arrangement in terms of which parents can send their children to the schools of their choice. Unfortunately, we have a position that in Gauteng, particularly, there are too few good schools, and parents don't all have access to good education. We're very often confronted with a situation that you have English medium learners living across a single medium Afrikaans schools, but the majority of Afrikaans-speaking people are faced by the fact that they live in the surroundings of majority single medium English schools. So it cuts both ways in terms of the problem of access to a school of your choice.
What do you say? In conclusion, what do you say to the critics of this move, who says that this does nothing to deal with exclusivity and, by default, eradicating racism and exclusion in schools?
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly what they're saying, Eben, but what I've seen and what I've read is that people are saying this is particularly Afrikaans medium schools wanting to be exclusively white. That is absolute rubbish, because those are all integrated schools, all our members across the country, and we don't only have Afrikaans medium schools as members. In fact, the majority of our members are English medium, and even in the ex-homelands where Zulu or Xhosa or whatever language may be used as language of instruction. The point is that what the debate is about is what is the best for the children, and the best for the children is mother tongue education. And that must be, obviously, in a non-discriminatory manner where children are allowed, irrespective of the color of their skin, into the schools, and that is exactly what is happening in all of our schools. They are the most representative and diverse schools in the entire country.
I thank you for joining us today and giving us your views. That's the Chief Executive Officer of the Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, FEDSAS. We're talking, of course, about language in schools. Now, I have to tell you, Gauteng Department of Education, they couldn't join us. They said they were unable or unavailable to join us in this conversation. Let's take a quick look at your tweets. What are you at Twitter about right now? What is the conversation? Let's see. Oh, there is no Twitter. We're going to Skype quickly. Now, an interesting story. Childhood often brings back our fondest memories. But for the 15 million underage girls married off every year, their childhood is short-lived. Although the act is illegal in most countries, child marriage is a custom that is still often being practiced. Speaking at the international conference in Casablanca in Morocco 2 weeks ago, the General Secretary of the World Young Women's Christian Association, Nyarazai Gumvonvanza, says that although there's been a global push to prevent child marriages, millions of girls around the world are still forced to live a life that they do not want. Now, joining us from Senegal, or Dakar in Senegal, is the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund Senior Child Protection Specialist, Francesca Monetti. Very good morning to you, Francesca. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you, too. Great to be here.
It may be easy to criticize child marriage from a westernized or Western perspective. How, in many tribes and rural communities across the globe, it's a long-standing tradition. Just give us a better idea what this practice means to these communities.
Indeed, in many communities throughout Africa, child marriage is the normal way to proceed when a child reaches 15 or 16 years old, sometimes even younger. And it's been this way for hundreds of years, if not thousands. And there is no real other alternative in these places. And so it's not so much that it's a practice that people choose. It's very much what people just do, the same way that in our countries, people get married after 18 or sometimes much, much later, because that's the way that we do things. You have to remember that in many of the communities in which child marriage is very high, they're very poor communities with very little or inexistent other options. For example, secondary schools just may not exist or may be so far away that they're impractical.
How do these marriages affect boys and girls differently?
Well, they're much more prevalent among girls, although they do exist also among boys. So if you look at global figures, you have some 700 million women alive today, 700 million, huge number, who were married as children. And you have 140 million men who were married as boys, as children. So it affects both, but it affects girls in a much, much, much larger numbers. Also because girls typically have a lower status in society, it just kind of keeps them at a lower status in society. It shortchanges their opportunities more than with boys. But if a boy is married early, he has the similar problems And also, if a boy marries a very young girl, who then has her first pregnancy, her first child, say at 15, both children are affected.
Now, Francesca, we're just going to have a look at a map and see where it's most prevalent. But I want to talk about the heart of the matter. The crux of it really is about finances quite often. There's a financial element to it, and that's probably why it affects so many poverty-stricken communities. How do we as the world then overcome this financial issue?
You know, there is a perception that poverty is the main cause. I don't think we have enough evidence to actually show that. What we have is evidence that shows that poverty, there is also child marriage. But we can't jump to the conclusion that it's because of poverty that child marriage exists. In many, many places where I visited, I was in the north of Burkina Faso last week in the Sahel region, where 87% of girls are married before 18. And what I hear over and over again is that it's not the poverty that's so much the issue, but it's the honor, the question of honor.
Yeah.
There is great fear that if a girl doesn't get married early, she may get pregnant. And that's dishonorable for her and for the entire family. So child marriage often is a means almost of prevention of dishonor. Everybody in those communities is poor. And if everybody agreed that they would all, to delay the age of marriage, they could.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. That is Francesca Monetti. She is the UN International Children's Emergency Fund Senior Child Protection Specialist. She came to us via Skype from Dakar in Senegal to talk about this issue that affects the wider world. Quick look at the final tweets around child marriage. 15 million girls are married off every year. We can't uphold children's rights without ending child marriage, says Girls Not Brides. Plan Reza says child marriage hinders girls from fulfilling their potential, infringes on their rights and drains their mental and physical capacities. No more tweets. That's it. Child marriage, bring back our girls. It's time to bring back... Child marriage is a global problem and it's time to bring back our girls. Yes, lovely picture there around the emotive issue of child marriage. It affects all of us. It is our future, after all. That's where we wrap it. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show, of course, is live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show later available on demand on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it even in the office. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.